Hi, hello, welcome back to the second video in our series, The Project. Um, if you missed the last one, then you might want to go back and have a look at it. Hopefully there'll be a link in the description below if I can figure out how to do that. But in the last one we spoke about gathering the user stories, the requirements for this little project that we're going to be working on, which is building a project management system on Salesforce. That was last time. This time we are going through the initial design process of this. So we're taking those requirements that we gathered in the last one and turning them into an actual system design. And for that, actually before we get onto that, I'll just quickly, at the end of the last one we had a fairly scruffy looking list of user stories of requirements. So I've tidied that up a little and added a couple of new ones as well. So essentially these are the user stories that we saw before, and then at the end there's actually probably I think just one new one, which is to do with the licensing. I'd quite like to build this system in such a way that the standard users, the people who are actually working on the project once it's up and running, can actually use platform licenses rather than full Salesforce licenses. That will give us a much cheaper rollout essentially. So if you decide to use this system for realties, the users that you're adding, the people who are working on your projects, won't need to have full Salesforce licenses. Obviously if they have full Salesforce licenses already, then there's no issue, but you need to keep these things reasonable if you possibly can. So yeah, that's the only additional one that I've added. Other than that, these are our requirements. Now it's worth kind of looking at the start here. We have the first thing that is mentioned is that we need to be able to create a new project, and we actually set out some of the fields that we would want to have for that project. Okay. Secondly, we want to be able to add tasks to the project, and we have a number of fields which have been defined for those tasks as well. So that's what we're going to start putting together is what objects or what tables are we going to need in our system, and how will they relate to each other, and what properties will they have. Okay, and to do that, first of all, we're going to start with something called an entity relationship diagram, which sounds complicated, but it ain't all that bad really. So I usually use Lucidchart for this, but whatever charting app you prefer to use, feel free to use that, and that extends as far as big sheet of paper and a set of pens. You don't have to be fancy about this. Really all you're doing is plotting out what objects you're going to need to have and how they need to relate to each other. Now if you want to do that on a whiteboard, if you want to do that on a great big sheet of A3 paper with some marker pens, or if you want to use your own diagramming tool, then knock yourself out. But I happen to get along with Lucidchart because it doesn't tend to go too badly wrong for me. So that's what I'm going to use here. So I'm going to start off with an entity. Okay, so an entity is basically it's an object, it's a table, it's a thing. In this case, the entity that we're going to start with is the project. Okay, so there we go. That's the project. And what do we know about the project? What information do we want to be able to hold about the project? Well, over here we have a list of fields, properties that we want to be able to track about the project. So we've got the name of the project, we've got the description, the start date and the end date. Okay, we'll probably think of other things to add to it later on, but at least to begin with, this will be enough to be starting with. Okay, so we need to have a project name. We will need to have, actually we're going to need more fields in this. I'm going to bump up the number of fields to 5 because I think that's going to be enough. Name, description, start date, and actually we're going to need more than 5. We're going to need probably about 6 or 7. So name, description. Okay, I'm going to want to have a status field. Is this project planned? Is it actively being pursued? Is it completed? Was it cancelled? And so on. We're also going to want a start date and an end date. What else? Project manager. And there'll be a bunch of other stuff that we want to know about the project, but that will do for the time being. Okay. Now, within that project, the next thing that's mentioned in our list of user stories is we want to have a list of tasks. We want to be able to add tasks to a project. Okay. So that means we're going to need, guess what? We're going to need a tasks entity. So I'm going to drag another entity over here. I'm going to call it task. Okay. And the task is going to relate to the project. So I'm going to need to have a project ID. Oops, put that in the wrong place. There we go. Project ID. Okay. And that project ID is going to allow us to relate the task to the project. Okay. And the way we represent that in an entity relationship diagram is by adding a line between the two. Okay. So I'm going to take a line from the project and connect it to the project ID. There we go. This is a crow's foot diagram, is how it's also sometimes described, because at one end of the line that we've joined here, we've got a crow's foot. There's a whole raft of detail about how these diagrams are supposed to be set out and exactly what everything means. Okay, you probably don't need to know all of them. For the purposes of a project like this, really what you need to be able to do is to represent one-to-many and many-to-many relationships. Okay, what does that mean? So a one-to-many relationship is something like this. Okay, so you've got a project, and each project can have any number of tasks associated with it. Okay, a project might have one single task. It's a very boring project, but a project is more likely to have a whole series of tasks associated with it, each with their own start and end date. Okay, so for each project you will have a lot of tasks, but for each task, that task will belong to one project. So that's what we call a one-to-many relationship. Okay, and in this case, one project has many tasks, so the line that you do has one at this end and many at this end, and that gives you one project to many tasks. That's how we represent a one-to-many relationship in an entity relationship diagram. So, what project to task? What are the properties of the task? We've already got the project ID because that allows us to link it back to the project, but what else are we going to need? Well, each task, again I'm going to add a whole bunch of additional fields to this because we're going to need some. So the task, first of all, it's going to need a person that it's assigned to. So I'm going to say assigned to. Okay. What else? It's going to need a title. Oops. There we go. Yeah. So a title, a description, which will be the sort of long text version of the title. So description. Okay. It's also going to need a status. So have we started the task? Are we halfway through the task? Have we completed the task? Actually, that's a good point. We're going to want to know how much of it we've done. So if we say percent complete, that will give us a number of how far we are through the task. Okay. We're going to run out of fields fairly quickly. Okay. What else? We are going to want to know start date. Okay. And we're going to want to know how long it's expected to last. Yeah. So if we've got a task to do a particular thing, how many days do we expect it to take to complete that task? Okay. So we could do start date and end date. Generally speaking, for something like a task, it's easier to just say we're going to start on this date and we expect it to take 5 days to complete. So I'm going to say start date and then days, length in days. Okay, what else? I can't think of anything else at the time being, so we'll leave it at that for now. Okay, so we've got our project, and within the project we've got task. That's nice. Okay, what's next? Let's go back to here and see what else we want to add. We need to be able to assign tasks to team members. Okay, well, before we assign tasks to team members, that implies that we're going to need team members. So in our project, we're also going to want another entity here, which is called a team member. Yeah, I'll call it team member for now. We might reword some of these things. I like to capitalize these things because it is a title. There we go. And what do we know about the team member? Well, first of all, we know that it relates to the project. So project ID. Okay. What else do we know about the team member? Well, we're going to want to link it to a person. Okay. Now on the Salesforce platform, people are essentially contacts. That's the word that we use for that. But in this case, the people that can be assigned tasks within a project are actually going to be users of the system. So in this case, I'm going to say it's going to be a user, right? So the team member is going to be a user of the system because they need to be able to log into Salesforce in order to see their list of tasks, so therefore they are a user. It sort of makes sense to use the user object, a standard user object, to represent that. What else? What would be very useful, we're going to need to be able to report on how much this project is expected to cost, okay? And you work that out based on the rate that you're charging for your resources. So each team member is going to have a rate associated with them. So we're going to call this rate. Oops, wrong field again. User and then rate. Okay. Again, I think that'll do for the time being. We'll probably think of more stuff, and we can always add more fields onto the system as and when we need to. So I'll just quickly add another line in to link the project to the team member via the project ID field. Okay, right. What's next? Back to the project list, or to the user stories list. So we should be able to add or assign tasks to team members. Okay, so we're tracking who's working on what. So again, coming over here. Oops. Yes, right click to drag. So the assigned to field is going to tell us which team member from the project is doing this particular task. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly scoot this over here, and I'm going to take another line which goes between the team member and the assigned to. Okay, each time you add one of these relationships, it's worth just having a little think about, have we got it the right way around? So from the project to the task, we've got multiple tasks for each project. Each project has multiple tasks. Each task has one project. Yeah, okay, so that works out okay. For the project and the team members, okay, each project can have multiple team members, but the team members are going to be linked to one project. Now, here's the thing. That user over here, okay, that's actually user ID. Okay, because you might be thinking, well, what about if I've got someone who needs to be able to work on more than one project? Okay, well, this user field, I'm going to change that to user ID because it's not just the name of the user, it's a relationship to the actual user entity. So I'm going to add the user entity over here. I'm going to call it user. Okay, and it's a standard object, so later on I'll be color coding these to sort of distinguish between the custom objects we're adding and the existing standard objects that are already on the system. Each user can have a team member relationship with multiple projects, so therefore I can drag from that to the user ID, and that allows us to have each project has multiple team members, each team member is linked to one project, and each user can have multiple team member relationships, but each team member is going to be linked to one user at a time. Okay, so what's next? Oh yeah, we're checking the relationships. So again, from the team member to the assigned to, each team member can have multiple tasks assigned to them, but each task will be assigned to one team member as the person that's responsible for that particular task. So again, the way these things are all sort of defined at the moment, that's all kind of making sense. At least it's making sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you guys as well. So the next thing is we want to be able to view the progress on the project, and we've kind of got that covered already because we have here the status field. Okay, so the status field basically tells us how the project is going so far. So that should be fine. Also, whenever we when we work on this a little bit longer, we'll be able to see the status and the progress on each of the various tasks that relate to the project as well. So we'll be able to roll up essentially the progress that we're making on all of our tasks to the project as well. So, the status of the project is basically, have we started it? Are we still working on it? Have we finished it, essentially? But how far along we are will actually be worked out by how far we are along on each of the various tasks that make up the project. Okay, so rather than putting we're 50% through the project on the project itself and then expect the project manager to keep that up to date, it makes more sense to track our progress on each of the tasks, which is something that each of the task assignees can be responsible for, and then use that information to kind of report on how the project itself is going. So, there. But anyway, the point is, we're covered for that one. Okay, next we need to be able to generate reports. Well, that's just something which Salesforce does really well anyway, so we don't really need to worry about it. By building this structure in a way that fits the requirements, it also kind of means that we will automatically be able to report on it in a meaningful way. That's one of the cute things about databases. If you design your data structures in a way that match your requirements, then the reports that you require from those requirements are generally covered as well. Now, if you've got a specific set of reports that you definitely need to be able to produce, that can also be a useful input to designing your data structures, because maybe there's an extra level of granularity required for the reports that wasn't mentioned in the user stories or something like that. But as a general rule, for the purposes of a project like this, design your data structures correctly and your reports kind of fall out of it naturally. So yeah, we'll make that assumption for the time being. I think we'll be safe with that. Next, we need to be able to collaborate with team members. Okay, now that's actually something which is pretty much built into this as well. Okay, so as well as our tasks, we will have, actually I need to find a different word for this. Task isn't going to work because that's one of the standard things in Salesforce. So I will call it a project task instead, because otherwise we'll get into trouble. There, okay, good. But anyway, for each of the project tasks, we can have a set of activities associated with it. So, I could set a Salesforce task for one of my colleagues to prepare the presentation for something. There's also collaboration tools built into Salesforce. There's Chatter, which is actually pretty good. And so we can basically enable Chatter for the project or for the project tasks, and then use that to manage the back and forth which might be needed for delivering the tasks among all the various different people. But anyway, for the time being, we've kind of got that covered anyway, so I'm going to skip over that one. Be able to customize the project management tool. Well, that again is built into the Salesforce system. Each of these objects that we're adding will be custom objects in Salesforce. And Salesforce is very good at allowing its custom objects to be extended. So, each of these things that we're talking about adding here, the project task, the team member, not the user, that already exists, but these other things, they will be custom objects, and then those custom objects will have custom fields. Okay, and you can also add custom fields to standard objects in Salesforce. So if we had a need on the user field, for example, on the user object to have their standard rate, for example, okay, so that means that the resources that we're adding to the project, their rate that we're charging for them on the project will be whatever set in this team member field. Okay, this one here. But we can set a default for that on the user record itself. So we can say this person, normally they cost £1,000 a day as a resource. Okay, so if they're on your project, then you're going to be paying £1,000 a day for that resource. And in that case, when we add them to a project, the team member record that we've added for them would have a default rate of £1,000 a day. But the customer that we're doing the project for may have negotiated a better rate, or if they're really bad, they may have negotiated a worse rate. So the rate that we're charging for a given project may be different from the default, but we will have a standard rate field on the user record. Okay, that standard rate field does not exist normally in Salesforce, so that's going to be a custom field that we're adding to the standard user table. That's quite a long explanation for a fairly simple process, but hey, that's standard for me. Right, what's next? they need to be able to integrate with other tools. Do you know what? I'm going to take that off and call that descoped, because I can't be bothered with integration for this project here. That was one of the suggestions from the AI that built the initial list in the last video. By the way, for those of you who haven't seen the last video, the AI came up with quite a nice list of a good starter list of requirements, which needed minimal tidying up and minimal extensions. So that's what we're working with. We're kind of letting the AI take the part of the customer for this. But one of the things it asked for is to be able to integrate with other tools, which Salesforce absolutely can do, but it has this habit of getting complicated, and this is supposed to be a simple project, just as a sort of a demonstration, and shows people, you know, what you can do with Salesforce and how you can do it. So therefore, I'm not going to touch that. So I hope we're comfortable with that, and we are going to move on before anyone asks any questions. Well, you have the opportunity to ask questions. Next, get help and support. Again, I'm going to descope that because, yeah, you can get help. You can get help from Salesforce directly. Obviously, they have a support team. And if you can't get hold of Salesforce, or if you would rather deal with someone else, then, you know, find an implementation partner or a Salesforce consultant or someone like that. And I will just mention that's what I do. But, you know, other Salesforce consultants are definitely available and possibly preferable. Next, project team member. So as a project team member, we need to be able to see a list of our project tasks, which again, we're covered for, because, you know, what we're basically doing is we're saying, show me a list of all the project tasks where the project ID is this project and the assigned to is me. Okay, that's basically going to be our list of tasks for this project. So we're covered for that particular requirement. What's the next one? I want to see all of my tasks. Well, again, we're covered here, because the query to show all of your tasks is just going to be, as a team member, show me all of the project tasks where I am the assigned to team member, yeah? And that will show me all of the tasks for whatever project, yes? And then the next one is, I want to see a filtered list of tasks, and again, you know, we can just basically adjust our report or our query or our list view or whatever to show those tasks where the assigned to is me and the status is open, for example, or assigned to is me and the status is closed, etc. Yeah, so you get the idea. That's how that works. So that's the structure we're going to build. You know, again, there's some tidying up to be done. At this point, usually, if I'm going to present this to a client, I would generally start, you know, moving things around on the canvas and just making sure that the lines line up the way you would expect them to, that nothing looks too badly out of place. And, you know, I don't have random fields that I haven't defined yet, you know, the placeholder fields that I've left there, and you know, everything lines up. And I would usually color, you know, let's say that the custom ones would be green, and the standard objects that already exist in the system might be blue, or whatever. You know, this is the sort of thing that you would actually present to a client, and then you can kind of take that diagram and export it and put it into a presentation, and everyone goes, ooh, that's nice. But we don't need to worry about too much of that. This is essentially the structure that we're going to be building, and I think we're going to be building it in the next video. So hopefully this has made sense. Again, I sort of burbled through some of it, but yeah, hopefully it was at least not too difficult to follow. I'll probably tidy up the diagram and everything else before we go on to the next bit. Again, if we were doing this as a proper project, we would have produced an actual design document. So this would be an element in a design document, and the design document would go into the details of you know, all the fields that are going to be in the project, all the fields that are going to be in the project task, and how the various different things relate to each other. You know, and it would have appendices and, you know, all kinds of cool and funky things. And, you know, if you're really good, you go back to your use case, your user stories list, and you know, for each of the user stories, you sort of mention which part of the design document covers which of these user stories. Okay, so the bit that we went through a little earlier, where I said, okay, this one, we're covered by this, and this one we're covered by that, and this one we're going to need to add a new object to do this, and so on. Basically, you end up with a section in the design document that covers each of the user stories, so it's easy for the client to go through and kind of cross-check and make sure that the thing that we asked for is being addressed in this design, and the place where it's being addressed is here, and if I read through that description, it doesn't make me worry. It doesn't make me think, I don't think they quite understood what we're looking for here. Okay. Generally speaking, there's a bit of back and forth. Okay, so the client will say, we need this, and we go, do you mean this? And they go, no, we mean this, and so on. But that's what you would do normally. We're not doing that here because I am kind of my own client for this project. I'm building my own project management system, so I can kind of skip over some of the little nitty-gritty details. But I'll explain as I go where those nitty-gritty details would normally be. Again, if you're using this series of videos as a sort of a tutorial on how to develop your own solutions on the Salesforce platform for your own org, then you probably should still document it in as much detail as you possibly can, because you might get hit by a bus next week, and whoever has to pick up the pieces of the system, hopefully not pieces of you, hopefully it's not fatal, but whoever's picking up the pieces will thank you if the documentation is good. Okay, so yeah, anyway, on that morbid note, let's call this video to a close, and I'll see you in the next one, where we'll actually start building stuff, and this is where it gets cool. All right, see you next time. Take care. Bye.